I opened my mailbox on a Tuesday morning expecting bills. Instead, found a foreclosure notice for $539,000 on a house I had never seen. The bank demanded immediate payment on a mortgage, signed in my name 3 months ago. My hands shook as I read the address. It was in the same town where my sister Sarah lived with her husband and 2 kids. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We need to talk. Come to dinner tonight. It's about family duty." My stomach dropped as the pieces started connecting. The drive to my childhood home felt like heading to my own execution. I clutched the foreclosure notice in my sweaty palm, my mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. The familiar suburban street looked the same as always, but everything felt different now. I parked behind my father's old pickup truck and noticed Sarah's minivan in the driveway. Whatever this was about, they had planned it as a group effort. I walked up the cracked concrete steps to the front porch where I had played as a child, never imagining I would one day dread entering this house. The door opened before I could knock, revealing my mother Patricia with that fake smile she wore when she wanted something. She was 58 now, her auburn hair showing gray roots she refused to dye, wearing the same floral dress she had worn to every family gathering for the past 5 years. "Ethan, sweetheart, come in. We have so much to discuss." Her voice carried that syrupy tone that had always preceded her most manipulative moments. I stepped inside, and immediately felt the weight of expectation in the air. The living room had been arranged like a courtroom, with my father Robert sitting in his recliner, Sarah and her husband Marcus on the couch, and an empty chair positioned directly across from all of them. My father looked older than his 62 years, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He had never been able to stand up to Patricia during their marriage, and their divorce 10 years ago had not changed that dynamic. He avoided eye contact as I entered, focusing instead on the beer can in his hands. Sarah sat forward eagerly, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that had seen better days. She was 32, 2 years younger than me, but the stress lines around her eyes made her look older. Marcus lounged beside her with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. At 35, he had the soft appearance of a man who had given up on ambition, his receding hairline hidden under a baseball cap he wore everywhere except church. His smirk told me he knew exactly what was coming and was enjoying my discomfort. "Sit down, son," Patricia said, gesturing to the empty chair. "We need to have a family meeting about some important matters." I remained standing and pulled out the foreclosure notice. "You mean like this mortgage for $539,000 that someone signed in my name?" The room went silent. Sarah's face flushed red, and Marcus shifted uncomfortably. My father finally looked up from his beer, his expression pained. Only Patricia maintained her composure, though I caught a flicker of calculation in her eyes. "Well," she said slowly, "I suppose there is no point in beating around the bush. Yes, we used your information to secure the mortgage for Sarah and Marcus's house. But before you get upset, you need to understand the circumstances." My blood pressure spiked. "I need to understand the circumstances of identity theft and fraud." Sarah jumped up from the couch, tears already streaming down her face. "It is not fraud when it is family, Ethan. We were desperate. Marcus lost his job at the factory, and we had already lost one house to foreclosure. The kids needed stability. We could not qualify for a mortgage with our credit history, so you decided to destroy mine instead." I shot back. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice defensive. "Look, man, we knew you made good money with that computer job of yours. We figured you could handle it if things went sideways. It was supposed to be temporary until we got back on our feet." Patricia moved closer to me, her voice taking on that maternal tone she used to guilt me into submission as a child. "Ethan, honey, you are the only successful one in this family. You have that nice apartment, that good job at the tech company, and no real responsibilities. Sarah has 2 children depending on her. Blood is thicker than water, and sometimes family has to make sacrifices for each other." "Sacrifices?" I laughed bitterly. "You are asking me to sacrifice my entire financial future for a house I will never live in. Do you have any idea what this could do to my credit, my career, my life?" Robert finally found his voice. "Son, we never meant for you to find out this way. We thought we could handle the payments, and you would never need to know. But Marcus got laid off again last month, and Sarah's part-time job at the daycare barely covers groceries. I stared at my father in disbelief. You knew about this? You all planned this together? We did what we had to do for family, Patricia said firmly. And now we need you to do your part. The mortgage payments are $800 a month. That is nothing for someone with your salary. $800? I pulled out my phone and showed them the foreclosure notice. This says you are 3 months behind on payments totaling over $2,400, plus late fees and penalties. And that is just what you owe now. This is a 30-year mortgage for over $500,000. Sarah collapsed back onto the couch, sobbing dramatically. Please, Ethan. I am pregnant again. Twins. We cannot lose this house. The kids love their rooms, their school, their friends. You would be destroying their entire world over money. The manipulation was so transparent it made me sick. I would be destroying their world? I am not the one who committed multiple felonies to buy a house you could not afford. Patricia stepped between me and Sarah, her mask finally slipping to reveal the cold calculation underneath. Now, you listen to me, Ethan Michael Rodriguez. This family has always stuck together, and you are not going to be the one to break that tradition. Sarah needs this house for her children. Your nieces and nephew need stability and security. If you refuse to help your own sister in her time of need, then you are no son of mine. And if I do refuse? I asked, curious to see how far she would go. Patricia exchanged a meaningful look with Sarah before continuing. Well, that would be very unfortunate. You see, Sarah and I have been talking about some troubling memories from when you two were children, things that perhaps should be brought to the attention of the authorities and your employer. Things that would certainly affect your security clearance at that nice technology company. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Sarah looked away, unable to meet my eyes, while Marcus grinned openly. My father stared at the floor, apparently willing to let his ex-wife destroy his son to protect his daughter. You would lie about child abuse to force me to pay for your fraud? I asked in amazement. I would protect my daughter and grandchildren by any means necessary, Patricia replied coldly. The choice is yours, Ethan. Pay the mortgage and be the hero who saved his family, or refuse and face the consequences of your alleged past actions. I am sure your girlfriend Jessica would be very interested to hear about your childhood behavior problems. The threat was clear and devastating. In my field of cybersecurity, any accusation of impropriety with minors would end my career permanently, regardless of whether it could be proven. Patricia knew exactly which pressure points to hit to ensure my compliance. I looked around the room at these people who shared my DNA, but clearly cared nothing for my well-being. Sarah continued her theatrical crying. Marcus looked triumphant. My father appeared defeated, and Patricia radiated satisfaction at having played her trump card. I need time to think about this, I said quietly. Of course, dear, Patricia replied sweetly, her fake smile returning now that she believed she had won. Take all the time you need. But remember, the foreclosure process moves quickly, and Sarah's children are counting on their uncle to do the right thing. I walked out of that house feeling like I had been mugged by my own family. I spent the next 3 days in a haze of disbelief and rage. The mortgage documents Patricia had shown me were sophisticated forgeries of my signature, created with access to my personal information that could only have come from someone who knew me intimately. The betrayal cut deeper than the financial damage, though that was devastating enough to destroy my plans for buying my own home and starting a family with Jessica. My girlfriend of 3 years tried to be supportive, but I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. Jessica was a high school teacher with a strong moral compass, and the idea that my own family would commit fraud using my identity was almost impossible for her to accept. She kept suggesting there must be some misunderstanding, that families did not deliberately hurt each other this way. Maybe they genuinely thought they could pay it back without you knowing, she offered over dinner on Thursday night. People do desperate things when their children are involved. I pushed my food around my plate, my appetite gone. Jess, they forged legal documents and threatened to accuse me of child abuse when I refused to go along with it. This is not desperation. It is calculated criminal behavior. She reached across the table to touch my hand. What are you going to do? I am going to fight back, I said, making the decision as I spoke the words. Tomorrow, I am hiring a private investigator and a forensic accountant. If they want to play games, I am going to find out exactly how deep this goes. Friday morning found me in the office of Amanda Chen, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. She was recommended by my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who listened to my story with growing concern. Family fraud cases are particularly nasty, she told me, as I laid out the mortgage documents and foreclosure notice on her desk. The emotional manipulation makes victims reluctant to pursue prosecution, which emboldens the perpetrators to escalate their behavior. You think they have done this before? In my experience, identity theft within families is rarely a one-time occurrence. The skills required to forge documents and navigate the mortgage application process suggest this was not their first attempt. I would like to start by running background checks on all the family members involved and examining their financial histories for the past 5 years. I also hired Dr. Rebecca Stone, a forensic accountant who could trace the paper trail of financial documents. Within 48 hours, they had uncovered a web of deception that went far beyond my mortgage situation. Your sister and her husband have declared bankruptcy twice in the past 8 years, Dr. Stone informed me during our Monday morning meeting. They lost their first home to foreclosure in 2015 after Marcus accumulated $37,000 in gambling debts. Their second bankruptcy in 2018 included credit card debt totaling $63,000. Amanda spread out surveillance photos on the conference table. These were taken at the Riverside Casino over the past month. Marcus and Sarah are regular visitors, typically spending several hours and hundreds of dollars per visit. This is not recreational gambling, Ethan. This is addiction behavior. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed large cash withdrawals from their checking account immediately before casino visits, followed by desperate attempts to cover basic living expenses with credit cards. They had been living far beyond their means while planning to saddle me with their mortgage debt. There is more, Amanda continued. I tracked down your cousin David Jr., your uncle's son from Austin. He contacted me after I started asking questions about family financial history. Apparently, your mother used his identity to open 3 credit cards last year, running up a total debt of $18,000 before he discovered it. I felt sick. How many people has she done this to? I have identified at least 4 potential victims so far, all family members. Your cousin Maria in Phoenix, your great-aunt Helen in Tampa, and your brother-in-law's sister Jennifer. I suspect there are others who have not come forward either because they have not discovered the theft or because they are too embarrassed to admit it happened. Dr. Stone pulled out another file. Your mother's bank records show irregular large deposits over the past 2 years totaling approximately $78,000. The deposits are listed as consulting fees, but I cannot find any evidence of legitimate consulting work. I believe these deposits represent profits from her identity theft operation. As we reviewed the evidence, my phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. Ethan, I know you are upset, but time is running out. The bank wants an answer by Friday, or they start foreclosure proceedings. Please do not let my babies lose their home because of your pride. I showed the message to Amanda, who shook her head in disgust. Classic manipulation. She is using her children as emotional weapons while refusing to acknowledge her own responsibility for their situation. What about the threat of false abuse allegations? I asked. Incredibly serious, Amanda replied. Making false statements to authorities about child abuse is a felony in most states. It also constitutes criminal conspiracy and extortion when used to coerce someone into financial compliance. However, proving their intent to lie would require them to admit their plan on record. Could we get them to confess to the entire scheme? Possibly. If you were willing to wear a recording device and meet with them under controlled circumstances, we might be able to gather enough evidence for prosecution. But I need to warn you, Ethan, this would be dangerous. If they suspect you are recording them, they might follow through on their threats immediately. I spent that evening walking around my neighborhood, trying to process the scope of my family's betrayal. My mother had been operating a criminal enterprise using her own relatives as victims. My sister and her husband were gambling addicts willing to destroy anyone to fund their addiction. My father was either complicit or too weak to stop it. The next morning brought another devastating discovery. Amanda called me at work with urgency in her voice. Ethan, You need to see this immediately. Can you come to my office? I found her studying surveillance footage on her computer screen. This was recorded 3 days before the mortgage application was submitted. I got it from security cameras at a Starbucks near the downtown business district. On the screen, I watched my mother Patricia sitting across from a man I did not recognize, sliding a manila envelope across the table. The man examined the contents, nodded, and handed her a smaller envelope in return. Who is he? Leonard Walsh, a known document forger who has been under FBI investigation for the past 18 months as part of a larger identity theft ring. He specializes in creating fake identification documents and forged signatures for mortgage applications. I stared at the screen as the full implications hit me. They hired a professional criminal to forge my signature. It gets worse. Walsh was arrested last week on federal charges related to a separate case. If the FBI reviews his client records as part of their investigation, they are going to find evidence of your mother's activities. This is no longer just a family matter, Ethan. This is federal crime territory. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at the evidence files spread across my coffee table. Jessica curled up next to me on the couch, finally beginning to understand the true scope of what we were dealing with. I cannot believe your own mother would do this to you, she said quietly. How could she sleep at night knowing she was destroying your future? I think she genuinely believes she has the right to use me however she wants for Sarah's benefit, I replied. In her mind, I exist to serve the family's needs, not to have my own life and goals. My phone rang, displaying my mother's number. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker so Jessica could hear. Ethan, honey, I just wanted to check in and see how you are feeling about our family situation. I know this is difficult for you, but I hope you understand that sometimes we have to make hard choices for the people we love. Sarah is really struggling right now, and she needs to know her big brother is going to step up and take care of her family. Please call me back so we can discuss the payment arrangements. Love you. The casual tone, as if we were discussing holiday plans instead of felony fraud, made my skin crawl. She is completely delusional, Jessica observed. No, I said grimly. She knows exactly what she is doing. This is just how she operates. She commits the crime, then manipulates everyone around her to normalize it and make her the victim if anyone objects. That night, I made my decision. I called Amanda and Dr. Stone to arrange a meeting for the next morning. It was time to fight back, regardless of the personal cost. Monday morning found me at the police station filing reports for identity theft, fraud, and extortion. Detective Maria Santos listened to my story with the weary expression of someone who had seen too many family destruction cases. Mr. Rodriguez, I want you to understand that prosecuting family members for financial crimes is complicated and emotionally draining, she warned me. Are you prepared for the possibility that this could tear your family apart permanently? Detective, my family tore itself apart the moment they decided to commit crimes using my identity, I replied. I am just refusing to be their victim, she nodded approvingly. Good. Too many people allow themselves to be victimized repeatedly because they feel guilty about holding family members accountable. I will start the paperwork, but I need you to know that the bank will likely continue holding you responsible for the mortgage until we can prove fraud to their satisfaction. My next stop was the bank that held the mortgage. Senior loan officer Thomas Wright reviewed my documentation with professional skepticism. Mr. Rodriguez, while I sympathize with your situation, the bank's position is that these documents appear to be legitimate signatures, and the mortgage application process was completed according to standard procedures. Until law enforcement concludes their investigation and provides us with definitive proof of fraud, you remain legally responsible for this debt. So I am supposed to pay for a house I have never seen while you investigate whether or not I am the victim of a crime? I understand your frustration, but we have to protect the bank's interests as well. Mortgage fraud claims are not uncommon, and we cannot simply void mortgages based on customer disputes without conclusive evidence. I left the bank feeling like the victim of a crime who was being treated as the perpetrator. My credit score had already begun dropping due to the missed payments, and the foreclosure proceedings would destroy it completely if I could not resolve the situation quickly. That afternoon, I discovered my family had not been idle. My phone rang with calls from distant relatives and family friends, all asking concerned questions about my selfishness and abandonment of Sarah in her time of need. Patricia had launched a preemptive public relations campaign, painting herself as the devoted mother trying to hold the family together while I callously ignored my pregnant sister's desperate situation. My cousin Jennifer from Denver called during my lunch break. "Ethan, I just talked to Aunt Patricia, and she told me about Sarah's problems with the house. I cannot believe you are refusing to help your own sister. She is pregnant with twins and could lose everything." "Jenny, did Patricia mention that they used my identity to get that mortgage without my knowledge or consent? She said there was some kind of misunderstanding about the paperwork, but that you had agreed to help and now you are backing out. She said you are trying to use technicalities to avoid your family responsibilities." I realized that Patricia's version of events portrayed me as a willing participant who was now reneging on my agreement, rather than the victim of identity theft. She was systematically poisoning my relationships with extended family members to isolate me and increase pressure for compliance. "Jenny, they forged my signature on legal documents and threatened to accuse me of child abuse if I did not agree to pay the mortgage. This is not a family disagreement. It is criminal behavior." The line went quiet for several seconds. "Ethan, that is a really serious accusation. Are you sure you are not just angry and maybe exaggerating what happened?" Even my closest relatives found it easier to believe I was lying than to accept that Patricia could be capable of such manipulation. By the end of the week, I had received similar calls from 6 different family members, all expressing disappointment in my selfishness and urging me to reconsider my position. The stress was affecting every aspect of my life. I had trouble concentrating at work, my sleep was interrupted by anxiety, and my relationship with Jessica became strained as we discussed the situation constantly without resolution. "Maybe you should just pay the mortgage," Jessica suggested Friday evening as we sat in my apartment. "I know it is not fair, but it might be easier than fighting this battle forever. $800 a month is not going to bankrupt you. It is not about the money, Jess. If I give in to this, they will know they can commit any crime against me as long as they threaten the right consequences. This would just be the beginning." She sighed deeply. "I love you, Ethan, but I cannot live in this constant state of crisis. This family drama is consuming our entire relationship. If you cannot find a way to resolve this soon, I think we need to take a break until you figure out what you want to do." Her ultimatum hit me like a physical blow. I was losing everything: my credit, my family relationships, and now possibly the woman I loved, because I refused to reward criminal behavior. Saturday morning brought a registered letter from a law firm representing Sarah and Marcus. The letter threatened to sue me for breach of oral contract, claiming I had verbally agreed to help with their mortgage payments, and they had relied on my promise when purchasing the house. "This is completely fabricated," I told Amanda when I brought her the letter. "There was never any conversation about me helping with mortgage payments before they bought the house. Of course it is fabricated, but it shows they are escalating their legal strategy. They are trying to create an alternative narrative where you are responsible for their debt through legitimate means rather than fraud." Tuesday brought even worse news. My security manager at work called me into his office with a concerned expression. "Ethan, I received a disturbing phone call yesterday from someone claiming to be your mother. She expressed concerns about your mental state and suggested that you might be experiencing some kind of psychological breakdown that could affect your work performance and security clearance." My heart sank. Patricia was already implementing her threat to sabotage my career. "Sir, I am currently dealing with a family situation involving identity theft and fraud. My mother is one of the perpetrators, and she is retaliating against my refusal to cooperate with their criminal activities." He studied my face carefully. "That is a serious allegation, Ethan. Do you have documentation to support these claims?" I provided him with copies of the police reports and private investigator findings. He reviewed the materials with growing concern. "This is definitely a security issue that needs to be resolved quickly. I am going to have to place you on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. We cannot risk having someone with compromised personal circumstances handling sensitive information." Walking out of my office building that day, I realized Patricia had successfully destroyed my career just as she had threatened. Even if I were eventually vindicated, the damage to my professional reputation would follow me for years. That evening, Amanda called with unexpected news. "Ethan, I have been investigating your family's background more thoroughly, and I found something interesting. Your Uncle David, Patricia's brother, has been keeping detailed records of her behavior for the past several years. Apparently, she defrauded him out of $12,000 in 2019, and he has been documenting similar incidents involving other family members. Uncle David? I have not spoken to him in years. He wants to meet with you. He says he has information that could help your case, and he is willing to testify against Patricia if necessary. Apparently, he has been waiting for someone to finally stand up to her. The next morning, I drove to Uncle David's house across town. He was a quiet man in his 60s who had always seemed peripheral to family gatherings, but he greeted me with unexpected warmth and determination. Ethan, I have been waiting for years for someone in this family to stand up to Patricia's bullying and manipulation, he said, as he led me to his home office. She has been operating like a one-woman crime wave, and everyone just enables her because they are afraid of becoming her next target. He showed me 3 filing cabinets filled with documentation of Patricia's suspicious activities, bank statements, forged checks, fake contracts, and detailed logs of her lies and manipulations going back 8 years. I started keeping records after she stole from me because I knew she would eventually go too far and someone would need evidence to stop her. I never imagined she would target her own son. As we reviewed his files, Uncle David revealed the full scope of Patricia's criminal activities. She had been systematically exploiting family members and family friends, using emotional manipulation and threats to cover her tracks. The document forger, Leonard Walsh. She has been using his services for over a year. I have surveillance photos of them meeting at least 4 times at various locations around the city. That evening, as I drove home with copies of Uncle David's evidence, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Mr. Rodriguez? This is Special Agent Maria Rodriguez with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. I understand you filed a police report about identity theft involving a suspect we are currently investigating. I would like to meet with you to discuss your case as it relates to our ongoing federal investigation. Everything was about to change. Special Agent Rodriguez met me at a downtown federal building the following morning. She was a serious woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and she listened to my story with the focused attention of someone accustomed to complex financial crimes. Mr. Rodriguez, your case intersects with a major federal investigation we have been conducting into a document forgery ring operating across 3 states. Leonard Walsh, the individual your private investigator identified, has been providing fraudulent documents to dozens of clients involved in mortgage fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. She opened a thick file folder filled with surveillance photos, bank records, and legal documents. When Walsh was arrested last week, he immediately began cooperating with our investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. He provided us with client lists, transaction records, and detailed information about the scope of his operation. Agent Rodriguez spread several photos across the conference table. I recognized Patricia in 3 of them, meeting with Walsh at different locations over the past year. Your mother, Patricia Rodriguez, has been one of Walsh's most active clients. She has purchased forged documents for at least 12 separate identity theft schemes, generating an estimated total theft amount of over $200,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000, minimum. We are still tracing all the accounts and transactions. What makes your mother's case particularly concerning is the sophistication of her operation and her willingness to target vulnerable family members and elderly individuals in her community. Agent Rodriguez pulled out another file. 3 weeks ago, we discovered that she had been using the Social Security numbers of minor children to open credit accounts. Specifically, she used the identities of her grandchildren, including your nephew Jake, who is 17, your niece Emma, who is 14, and your other niece Sophie, who is 12. The betrayal was so complete it left me speechless. Patricia had been stealing from children to fund her criminal enterprise. We also found evidence that your sister Sarah and her husband Marcus are more deeply involved than they initially appeared. Sarah has been actively recruiting former co-workers and friends as identity theft targets, providing their personal information to Patricia in exchange for a percentage of the stolen funds. Agent Rodriguez showed me bank records documenting payments from Patricia to Sarah, totaling over $35,000 during the past 18 months. Marcus has been providing technical expertise about credit reporting systems and mortgage application processes. His previous employment at various financial institutions gave him inside knowledge that enhanced the effectiveness of their fraudulent schemes. As the scope of the conspiracy became clear, I understood that my mortgage situation was just one small piece of a much larger criminal operation. My family had been running a sophisticated fraud ring that targeted their own relatives and friends. Agent Rodriguez, what does this mean for my situation with the mortgage? The bank will be required to remove the mortgage from your credit report and cease all collection activities once we provide them with our evidence of fraud. You will also be eligible for restitution through our asset forfeiture proceedings. She paused before continuing. However, I need to ask for your cooperation in gathering additional evidence against the primary conspirators. Would you be willing to participate in a controlled meeting with your mother and sister while wearing a recording device? The request made my stomach clench with anxiety. What would that involve? We would arrange for you to meet with them in a controlled environment, ostensibly to discuss the mortgage situation. The goal would be to get them to admit to the fraudulent activities on tape, providing us with direct evidence of their criminal intent and methods. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward intently. I have to be honest with you, Mr. Rodriguez. This could be dangerous if they suspect you are cooperating with law enforcement. Your mother has already demonstrated a willingness to make false allegations and threaten serious consequences to maintain control. If she realizes you are recording her, she might escalate her threats immediately. I thought about Jessica's ultimatum, my suspended job, and the destruction of my credit and reputation. What happens if I refuse to help? We have enough evidence to prosecute based on Walsh's cooperation and the documentation your uncle provided. However, recorded confessions would make our case much stronger and potentially help us recover more stolen funds for the victims. That evening, I called Jessica to discuss the FBI's request. She listened in stunned silence as I explained the full scope of my family's criminal activities. Ethan, I had no idea it was this extensive. I thought this was just about the mortgage, not a federal crime ring. I know. I keep thinking I understand how deep this goes, and then I discover another layer of betrayal. Are you going to wear the wire? I was quiet for a long moment. I think I have to. If I do not help stop this, they will just keep victimizing other people. Uncle David was right. Someone has to finally stand up to Patricia's behavior. What about the danger? What if they find out you are recording them? Agent Rodriguez will have backup agents nearby, and the meeting will be in a public location. Besides, Patricia has already threatened to destroy my career and accuse me of child abuse. How much worse can it get? Jessica was quiet for several seconds. Okay. If you are going to do this, I want to be part of it. I cannot just sit here worrying while you put yourself at risk for people who have treated you so terribly. The next morning, I met with Agent Rodriguez and her partner, Agent Thompson, to plan the sting operation. They explained that the recording device would be nearly undetectable and that they would position surveillance teams at strategic locations around the meeting site. Your goal is to get them to discuss the details of how they obtained and used your personal information for the mortgage application. If possible, try to get them to admit to previous fraud schemes and their relationship with Leonard Walsh. Agent Rodriguez handed me a small device about the size of a button. This will record everything clearly as long as you stay within reasonable distance of the people you are talking to. Try to keep the conversation natural and let them do most of the talking. That afternoon, I called Patricia to arrange the meeting. Ethan, sweetheart, I am so glad you called, she said with relief in her voice. I was starting to worry that you were going to let your pride destroy this family. I want to meet and discuss the situation, I told her. But I want Sarah and Marcus there too. If we are going to resolve this, everyone needs to be involved. Of course, dear. How about tomorrow evening at that nice restaurant downtown, the one with the outdoor patio? We can have a civilized family discussion and work everything out. As I hung up the phone, I realized this would likely be the last conversation I would ever have with my mother as a family member. After tomorrow, she would be a criminal defendant, and I would be the witness who helped convict her. The weight of that realization was devastating, but I knew there was no other choice. The alternative was to let her continue destroying innocent people's lives while hiding behind the facade of family loyalty. That night, I barely slept as I rehearsed the conversation in my mind and tried to prepare for whatever emotional manipulation Patricia would deploy. Tomorrow would determine whether justice finally caught up with my family's criminal enterprise. The restaurant patio was perfect for surveillance, open enough for the FBI teams to maintain visual contact while providing sufficient privacy for a sensitive family conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a corner table that would position the recording device optimally while giving me clear sight lines to the agents positioned nearby. Patricia arrived precisely on time, dressed in her best outfit and wearing the warm smile she reserved for public appearances. Sarah followed closely behind, her pregnancy now showing clearly under a loose-fitting dress, while Marcus brought up the rear looking uncomfortable in his ill-fitting suit. "Ethan, you look thin," Patricia said as she embraced me with theatrical affection. "This whole situation has been stressing all of us. I am so glad we can finally sit down and work things out like a civilized family." Sarah hugged me next, tears already forming in her eyes. "I have been so worried about you, big brother. I know this is hard, but I need you to understand how desperate our situation is." Marcus shook my hand with false heartiness. "Good to see you, man. I am sure we can figure out a payment plan that works for everyone." As we settled into our seats, I noticed Agent Rodriguez at a table 20 feet away, apparently enjoying dinner with Agent Thompson while carefully monitoring our conversation. Other surveillance team members were positioned throughout the restaurant and surrounding area. Patricia wasted no time taking control of the conversation. "Now, Ethan, I know you were upset about the way we handled the mortgage situation, but you have to understand that we were protecting you from having to make a difficult decision." "Protecting me?" "Yes, dear. If we had asked you directly to co-sign for Sarah's mortgage, you might have felt obligated to say yes even if it made you uncomfortable. This way, we handled everything ourselves and you only needed to get involved if there were problems." The casual way she reframed identity theft as considerate family planning was breathtaking in its audacity. Sarah leaned forward earnestly. "Ethan, we never intended for you to find out unless we absolutely had to involve you. Marcus was supposed to start his new job 3 weeks ago, but the company had budget cuts and eliminated the position. We have been scrambling ever since." "What new job?" I asked, genuinely curious about this detail that had not appeared in any of our previous conversations. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Well, it was not exactly a sure thing. More like a potential opportunity that we were counting on too heavily." "You mean it did not exist?" I said flatly. "Look, we may have been overly optimistic about our income prospects, but that does not change the fact that Sarah and the kids need this house," Marcus replied defensively. Patricia sensed the conversation was not going according to her script and decided to escalate her emotional manipulation. "Ethan, honey, I need you to listen to me very carefully. This family has been through enough heartbreak and division. Your father and I worked so hard to keep everyone together after the divorce, and now you are threatening to tear us apart over money. Patricia, they forged my signature on federal documents. This is not about money, it is about crime." Her expression hardened slightly before she regained control. "That is a very harsh word, dear. We prefer to think of it as taking care of family business. Sometimes the paperwork gets handled informally when there is trust and understanding between relatives." "Informally? You hired Leonard Walsh to create fake documents." The mention of Walsh's name caused all three of them to freeze momentarily. Sarah's face went pale, Marcus looked panicked, and Patricia's mask slipped completely for several seconds before she recovered. "I do not know what you are talking about, Ethan. Who is Leonard Walsh?" "The document forger you have been paying to create fake IDs and forge signatures for your identity theft schemes." Patricia laughed nervously. "Sweetheart, you have been listening to too many crime shows. We are just a normal family trying to help each other through difficult times." Sarah jumped in desperately. "Ethan, please do not let whatever you think you know destroy our relationship. I am carrying your nephew and niece right now. Do you really want them to grow up knowing their uncle abandoned them when they needed him most?" "What about Jake, Emma, and Sophie?" I asked quietly. "Did you think about them when you used their social security numbers to open credit accounts?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus actually knocked over his water glass, while Sarah began crying openly. Patricia stared at me with pure hatred before realizing she needed to maintain her facade. Ethan, I have no idea what you are talking about. Those children are precious to me. I would never do anything to harm their futures. Patricia, the FBI has bank records showing that you opened accounts using their identities and accumulated debt in their names. Jake is going to start college next year and discover that his credit has been destroyed by his own grandmother. Patricia's composure finally cracked completely. How dare you make such accusations against your own mother? After everything I have done for this family, after all the sacrifices I have made, you want to destroy me with lies and conspiracy theories? They are not lies, and you know it. Sarah stood up abruptly, swaying slightly from the pregnancy and emotional stress. I cannot listen to this anymore. Ethan, you have become so paranoid and cruel. You are trying to turn us into criminals because you do not want to help your own sister. Marcus finally found his voice. Look, man, maybe some paperwork was not handled perfectly, but that does not make us criminals. We are family. We are supposed to stick together and work things out. Patricia leaned forward, her voice dropping to the threatening tone I remembered from childhood. Ethan, you need to be very careful about the accusations you are making. There are things about your past that could be very damaging if they came to light. Things that could affect not just your career, but your relationship with that pretty girlfriend of yours. Are you threatening to make false allegations against me again? I am reminding you that families have secrets, and some secrets are better left buried. You can choose to be the hero who saved his sister and her children, or you can be the person who destroyed his family over money and ended up facing very serious questions about his own behavior. The threat was clear and recorded. Agent Rodriguez would have everything she needed to add extortion charges to the growing list of federal crimes. And what if I refused to cooperate? I asked, wanting to get their escape plan on record as well. Sarah and Marcus exchanged meaningful looks before Patricia answered. Well, that would be very unfortunate for everyone involved. Sarah and Marcus might have to consider relocating to somewhere with better opportunities, perhaps out of state where they could start fresh. You mean flee to avoid prosecution? I mean make rational decisions about their family's future, Patricia replied coldly. Marcus leaned in conspiratorially. We have been looking at opportunities in Nevada and Arizona, places where the cost of living is lower and there are fewer complications from past financial difficulties. They were discussing their plan to flee jurisdiction once they realized the FBI investigation was closing in on them. Patricia played her final card. Ethan, this is your last chance to do the right thing. Pay the mortgage, keep this family together, and we can all move forward. Refuse, and you will face the consequences of your choices. I have documentation about your teenage behavior that would be very interesting to law enforcement and your employer. What kind of documentation? Sarah has been very helpful in remembering details about your inappropriate behavior toward her when you were both younger. She has written statements describing incidents that would be quite damaging to your reputation. Sarah nodded through her tears. I did not want to remember those things, Ethan, but Mom helped me understand that I needed to face the truth about what happened. The false memory implantation was the final proof of Patricia's complete willingness to destroy anyone who threatened her criminal operation. She had spent time coaching Sarah to fabricate childhood abuse allegations that could send me to prison. So you are saying Sarah has written false statements accusing me of child abuse? I am saying Sarah has documented the truth about your past behavior, and that truth could be very inconvenient for you if it became public, Patricia replied with satisfaction. And you would take those false statements to the police if I do not pay the mortgage? I would make sure that the proper authorities had access to all relevant information about your character and history. The confession was complete. Patricia had admitted to identity theft, document forgery, conspiracy, extortion, and planning to file false police reports. Sarah and Marcus had confirmed their roles in the conspiracy and their plans to flee jurisdiction. I stood up from the table, looking at these three people who had shared my life for decades, but had never actually cared about my well-being. I think this conversation is over, I said quietly. Patricia's expression turned triumphant. I hope you make the right choice, Ethan. You have 48 hours to decide whether you want to save your family or destroy it. As I walked away from the table, I saw Agent Rodriguez and Agent Thompson already moving toward the patio. Within minutes, Patricia, Sarah, and Marcus would be under arrest, their criminal enterprise finally brought to justice. I did not look back. The arrests happened so quickly that other diners barely noticed the commotion. Agent Rodriguez and her team moved with professional efficiency, separating the three conspirators and reading them their rights while restaurant staff discreetly redirected other customers away from the scene. I watched from the parking lot as Patricia was led to a federal vehicle, her hands cuffed behind her back, her face a mask of rage and disbelief. She had spent so many years manipulating people through emotional blackmail that she genuinely seemed shocked to face real consequences for her criminal behavior. Sarah collapsed in tears as she was arrested, her pregnancy making the handcuffs awkward, and her sobs drawing sympathetic looks from bystanders who had no idea she was being charged with federal fraud crimes. Marcus tried to run but was tackled by Agent Thompson within 50 feet of the restaurant entrance, his brief escape attempt adding resisting arrest to his growing list of charges. Agent Rodriguez approached me as the suspects were loaded into separate vehicles. "Excellent work, Mr. Rodriguez. We got everything we needed and more." The recording clearly documents conspiracy, fraud, extortion, and plans to file false police reports. Combined with the evidence from Walsh and your uncle's documentation, this should result in significant prison sentences for all three defendants. What happens next? They will be processed and arraigned tomorrow morning. Based on the flight risk they demonstrated by discussing plans to flee the state, I expect the judge will deny bail or set it extremely high. The federal prosecutor will likely offer plea deals to Marcus and Sarah in exchange for their testimony against your mother, who appears to be the ringleader of the operation. That evening, Jessica and I sat in my apartment trying to process the events of the day. The relief of finally seeing justice was tempered by the emotional devastation of losing my entire immediate family to criminal prosecution. "How are you feeling?" Jessica asked as we watched the local news report about the arrests. "Honestly? Empty. I knew they were criminals, but watching them get arrested felt surreal. These are people I grew up with, shared holidays with, thought I knew. You did the right thing, Ethan. They were destroying innocent people's lives and using family loyalty as a weapon to avoid accountability." The news report identified Patricia as the alleged leader of a fraud ring that had stolen over $300,000 from victims across multiple states. The reporter mentioned that the investigation was ongoing, and additional arrests were expected as federal agents traced the full scope of the criminal enterprise. My phone rang constantly with calls from extended family members, reporters, and curious acquaintances who had heard about the arrests. I let most calls go to voicemail, not ready to discuss the situation with people who would inevitably ask how I could have turned in my own mother. The next morning brought a call from Agent Rodriguez with an update on the legal proceedings. "Your mother refused all plea offers and maintains her innocence despite the overwhelming evidence. Sarah and Marcus both accepted deals to plead guilty to conspiracy charges in exchange for reduced sentences and cooperation with our investigation." "What kind of sentences are we talking about?" "Marcus will likely serve 12 to 18 months and pay full restitution. Sarah's pregnancy and cooperation will probably result in home confinement followed by probation, though she will also be required to pay restitution. Your mother is facing 8 to 12 years in federal prison if convicted on all charges." The bank contacted me that afternoon to formally notify me that the mortgage had been removed from my credit report and all collection activities had ceased. They also issued a written apology for the inconvenience and offered to provide documentation to help repair any credit damage I had suffered. My security manager called to inform me that my administrative leave was being lifted and I could return to work immediately with a commendation for my handling of the situation. "Frankly, Ethan, the way you dealt with this criminal conspiracy targeting you shows exactly the kind of integrity and judgment we value in our cybersecurity team. Your security clearance will be expedited for renewal based on your cooperation with federal law enforcement." Uncle David called to check on my well-being and express his satisfaction that Patricia was finally facing consequences for her years of criminal behavior. I have been contacted by 8 other family members who want to file charges against Patricia for various fraud schemes. She has been operating like this for at least a decade, always staying just under the radar until now. How many total victims do they think there are? The FBI estimates at least 25 people were directly victimized, with total losses approaching $500,000. but the emotional damage to family relationships is probably incalculable. The preliminary hearing took place the following week. I attended as a witness and victim, sitting in the federal courthouse watching the 3 people who had tried to destroy my life face formal charges for their crimes. Patricia looked older and smaller in her orange jumpsuit, but her expression remained defiant as the prosecutor read the extensive list of charges against her. She glared at me with pure hatred when I was called to testify about the extortion attempt, making it clear that she blamed me entirely for the consequences of her own criminal behavior. Sarah wept continuously throughout the proceedings, her pregnancy making her appear fragile and sympathetic, despite her role in recruiting fraud victims. Marcus looked defeated and kept glancing around the courtroom as if searching for an escape route that did not exist. The judge set Patricia's bail at $250,000, which she could not afford, ensuring she would remain in federal custody until trial. Sarah and Marcus were released on their own recognizance due to their cooperation and guilty pleas, but were required to surrender their passports and remain within the state. That evening, I received an unexpected call from my nephew Jake, who was now 18 and away at college. "Uncle Ethan, I just heard about what happened with Grandma and Mom. I wanted you to know that I think you did the right thing. I found out last month that my credit score was destroyed by accounts I never opened. Now I understand what happened. Jake, I am so sorry you got caught up in this. Your grandmother's actions were inexcusable. I know. But I also know that if you had not stopped her, she would have kept doing this to other people. Thank you for having the courage to stand up to her when no one else would." Over the following weeks, the full scope of the criminal enterprise became clear, as federal investigators traced financial records and interviewed victims. Patricia had been operating increasingly sophisticated fraud schemes for over a decade, always targeting people who were emotionally or financially vulnerable and unlikely to report the crimes. The asset forfeiture proceedings recovered approximately 60% of the stolen funds, which were distributed among the victims based on their documented losses. I received compensation that covered my legal expenses and the credit damage I had suffered, though the emotional cost could never be fully repaired. Sarah's twins were born 2 months later, while she was serving her home confinement sentence. She sent me a brief letter expressing regret for her role in the conspiracy and asking if I would consider maintaining a relationship with her children, despite everything that had happened. Marcus completed his prison sentence and moved to Arizona to start over, having lost his family's home and most of their possessions to asset forfeiture. He sent a letter apologizing for his behavior and acknowledging that their actions had been inexcusable regardless of their financial desperation. Patricia's trial took place 8 months after her arrest. She was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, having shown no remorse and maintained her innocence despite overwhelming evidence of her guilt. She blamed everyone except herself for the destruction of our family, refusing to accept responsibility for the consequences of her criminal choices. The day of Patricia's sentencing, Uncle David and I sat together in the courthouse listening to the judge describe the scope of her criminal enterprise and its impact on dozens of innocent victims. "Justice has finally caught up with her," Uncle David said quietly as Patricia was led away to begin her prison sentence. "I just wish it had not taken so long and so much damage to other people." That evening, I realized that the nightmare was finally over, but the real work of rebuilding my life was just beginning. The federal prison system sent Patricia to a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania, far enough away that I never felt obligated to visit. She wrote me several letters during her first year of incarceration, alternating between attempts at manipulation and expressions of martyrdom, but I returned them all unopened. Some relationships cannot be repaired when they were built on deception and exploitation from the beginning. Sarah completed her home confinement and probation successfully, working part-time jobs to pay restitution while raising her 3 children. She sent occasional updates through Uncle David, expressing genuine remorse for her actions and asking nothing from me except the hope that her children might someday have a relationship with their uncle. I was not ready for that conversation, but I no longer felt the burning anger that had consumed me during the investigation and trial. Marcus emerged from prison a changed man, having used his incarceration to address his gambling addiction and complete vocational training in electrical work. He moved to Phoenix and remarried, sending a letter on the 2nd anniversary of his arrest to acknowledge that his choices had been inexcusable and expressing gratitude that I had stopped him before he destroyed more lives. My relationship with Jessica not only survived the ordeal, but grew stronger through our shared experience of overcoming a crisis that could have destroyed everything we had built together. She stood by me during the darkest months, when I questioned whether I had done the right thing by destroying my family, and her unwavering support helped me understand that protecting innocent people from criminals is always the correct choice, regardless of family relationships. We bought our first house together 18 months after Patricia's conviction, using the compensation from the asset forfeiture as our down payment. The irony that my mother's criminal enterprise ultimately helped fund my legitimate home purchase was not lost on either of us, but it felt like appropriate justice that her stolen money was returned to benefit her victims. My career in cybersecurity flourished as companies sought professionals who understood both the technical and human elements of fraud prevention. I developed training programs about family identity theft, helping other organizations recognize and respond to insider threats from people who exploit personal relationships to commit financial crimes. Uncle David became a father figure I had never had, sharing holiday meals with Jessica and me while providing the stability and wisdom that had been missing from my childhood. His decision to document Patricia's criminal behavior for years had been crucial to the successful prosecution, and his courage in standing up to her manipulation inspired me to maintain my own boundaries. Jake graduated from college with a degree in criminal justice, inspired by his experience as an identity theft victim to pursue a career in law enforcement. He worked part-time for my private investigator Amanda Chen while completing his studies, learning to help other families navigate the complex emotional and legal challenges of prosecuting relatives who commit crimes against them. 3 years after the arrests, I received notification that Patricia would be eligible for parole in 2 more years due to good behavior and completion of various prison programs. I felt no anxiety about her potential release because I had learned to build my life around people who chose honesty and accountability over manipulation and exploitation. The most profound change in my life was learning to distinguish between family loyalty and family enabling. Real love means holding people accountable for their destructive choices, not protecting them from the consequences of criminal behavior. Patricia had spent decades using emotional manipulation to convince her relatives that protecting her from accountability was the same as loving her. But genuine love requires honesty, boundaries, and sometimes the courage to say no to people we care about. Jessica and I married in a small ceremony attended by Uncle David, Jake, and the friends who had supported us through the most difficult period of our lives. We chose to define family as people who consistently treat each other with respect and honesty, rather than people who happen to share genetic material. Our wedding vows included promises to maintain individual integrity, even when it required difficult choices about family relationships. The financial recovery was ultimately complete, with all damaged credit reports corrected and full restitution paid to the victims. More importantly, the emotional healing allowed me to trust my own judgment about people and relationships, without the distortion of childhood conditioning that had made me vulnerable to manipulation for so many years. Looking back on that terrible Tuesday morning, when I first discovered the foreclosure notice, I realized that Patricia's criminal behavior had actually been a gift in disguise. Without the shock of discovering her fraud, I might have spent decades more accepting toxic family dynamics as normal, never learning to recognize manipulation or demand accountability from people who claimed to love me. The investigation and prosecution process taught me that justice is not about revenge or punishment, but about stopping harmful behavior and protecting innocent people from future victimization. Patricia chose to commit crimes against her own family members, and facing the consequences of those choices was the natural result of her decisions, not a betrayal by her son. Today, Jessica and I live in a home filled with genuine warmth and trust, surrounded by people who choose honesty over manipulation and accountability over enabling. We are planning to start our own family based on principles of integrity, respect, and healthy boundaries that will protect our children from the kind of exploitation I experienced. I still work in cybersecurity, but I also volunteer with organizations that help families recognize and respond to financial abuse from relatives. Many people struggle with the same false choice I once faced, believing they must choose between family loyalty and personal protection. I share my story to help them understand that real love sometimes requires the courage to hold people accountable for criminal behavior, even when those people are family members. The scar tissue from my family's betrayal has healed into wisdom about human nature and the importance of choosing relationships based on character rather than blood. I learned that being a good person sometimes means refusing to enable bad behavior, and that protecting innocent people from criminals is always more important than preserving family harmony. Most importantly, I discovered that building a life based on honesty and integrity attracts people who share those values, creating genuine family bonds that are stronger than anything based solely on genetic relationships. The people who love you will support your decision to do the right thing, even when it is difficult. The people who criticize you for refusing to enable criminal behavior are revealing their own character, not yours. Patricia will be released from prison eventually, but she will find that her victims have moved on to build lives that do not revolve around her manipulation and exploitation. The family she tried to control through criminal behavior has been replaced by healthy relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Justice was served, but more importantly, the cycle of manipulation and enabling was broken. Future generations of our family will grow up understanding that real love means treating people with honesty and respect, not exploiting their trust for personal gain. That is the legacy I choose to leave, and it started with having the courage to say no to criminals who happen to share my last name. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what was right? How do you think families should handle it when relatives cross legal and ethical boundaries? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and finding justice. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Sometimes people need to hear that it is okay to protect themselves from relatives who choose criminal behavior. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you understand that choosing integrity over family pressure is not betrayal. It is the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved. Stay strong, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that enabling criminal behavior is the same as family loyalty. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.